So we're beginning at verse 24 through to verse 29, and this is God's word. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowd were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. This is God's word. Last weekend I was in Edinburgh, and I was sitting just across from a couple on the tram when suddenly the guy let out a massive sneeze, and it was just on the tip of my tongue to lean across and to say bless you when his partner beat me to it, and thank goodness she did, because as soon as she said this to him, without missing a beat, the guy looked her straight in the eye, he lowered his voice and he said, "It's okay, I'm already blessed enough." And I can't describe to you what it felt like to be at the same time unbelievably inspired, but also sick to the pit of my stomach at what he said. And it took everything within me not to ruin this beautifully romantic moment between this couple to lean across and to ask, "Excuse me, what do you mean by blessed?" This morning we're beginning our series that's exploring the Sermon on the Mount. And it's teaching that helps us to consider what does it mean to live a blessed life? In the Bible, to be blessed means not just to be happy. It means to be fortunate, to be flourishing, and to be fruitful. It means to be supremely satisfied. It means to be able to enjoy a safety and a security in life. To be blessed is to live the good life, and the good life is to experience life with God. And throughout this sermon, this is what Jesus is unpacking. He's unpacking what it looks like to experience this good life and then to extend it to others. And so as we look at this sermon over the next couple of months, as we dig into what it is that Jesus is saying about this good life, you'll maybe have noticed that from the reading, we're not going to do so from the beginning, but we're going to go straight to the end. And it's at the end of the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus sets before his listeners what it means to acknowledge this teaching and also to follow him. And so by considering this first, it will hopefully give us some insight into how it is that we might respond to this teaching over the next couple of months. And it'll also provide us with the opportunity to consider, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it look like to be his disciple? And I think what's being communicated here at the end of the Sermon on the Mount is that to acknowledge Jesus' teaching and to live as his disciple means recognizing him, responding to him, and then resting in him. This, I think, is Jesus' invitation to those who have just heard him share this sermon. And it's also an invitation that's extended to each and every one of us. And it begins by recognizing him for who he is. The story that Jesus tells here of the two houses is in some ways, it's a really simple and it's a straightforward story. But one aspect of this story that could be a wee bit tricky is this idea of wise and foolish. When Jesus refers to people who are either wise or foolish, this moves me to wonder, what on earth is he getting at here? And well, one thing that Jesus isn't getting at when he says this is intelligence. We might be moved to think that this is all about intelligence, that to be wise is to be someone who's smart, and to be foolish is to be someone who's stupid. But these words have nothing to do with intelligence. Instead, they're getting at something else. Throughout the Bible, to be foolish is to be thought of as someone who's stubborn and self-centered. It's someone who's closed off in their thinking and they're not open to something more. It's to be someone who has sitting in their lap something that's totally amazing, that's ready to be picked up and enjoyed, but instead they choose to lift it and then just throw it away. To be a fool is to be someone who fails to see just what it is that they have. And so then to be wise is about seeing things a bit more clearly. The Bible says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and this doesn't mean to be scared or to be afraid. Rather, it means to be in awe. It's to be able to look at God and then be able to see Him clearly. It's about recognizing Him. Here, after Jesus has finished this huge and amazing sermon, what I think Matthew, the writer of the gospel, is asking us is, do you see? Do you actually recognize who it is that's just said all of this? Commentators will note that Matthew is a gospel that's continually pointing to the Old Testament. He's encouraging us continually to look back and to see how it is that Jesus is actually the fulfillment of all that's been. And just as Moses stood on top of a mountain and declared to the people the law of God, here we have Jesus standing on top of a mountain, declaring to the people what it means and looks like to live under God's rule as His people. But while Moses said that these are God's words that have been given to me and I now extend them to you, Jesus is very clear in this passage. These words are mine. These are not words that have been given to me. These are not words that I've heard from someone else and I've been inspired and so I look to share what they have to think now. These words are mine. And by making this clear, Jesus here is revealing something of Himself. He's not just someone who shares on behalf of the King. Rather, He is the King standing in their midst. And He deserves to be recognized. I think this is one of the greatest photos ever taken in sport. And it's from the Irish Open golf competition. And the golf course landed right on the edge of this farmer's field. And so he's obviously thought, happy days, I'm going to grab a deck chair, a cup of coffee, and I'm just going to have a front row seat to the golf and all that's going on. And the TV commentators, whenever they seen this, they were lapping it up. They were all over it, and they spoke about simplicity. They spoke about not having a care in the world. Their focus was on this farmer, and they admired just how relaxed he was as he watched all of the best golfers in the world. But when I seen this, my attention was drawn straight to the cows. I don't know about you. And I thought of this huge competition that's wrapped in fanfare. It's filled with the world's most famous golfers. This tournament that captures the attention of the masses, and you can't help but look at it because there they are in all their glory doing this thing, the best that it can ever be done. But for the cows, this meant nothing to them because they only have eyes for the farmer. Made me think, can we say that in our own lives? With all and everything that goes on, can we say that we're people that only have eyes for Jesus? That because He is so magnificent, because He's so brilliant, because He's so amazing, that we can only look at Him? Can we say that we're people who would regard Jesus to be the most important, intelligent, and central figure in all of history? And when we consider Him and look at His teaching, do we realize who it is that's before us? Do we recognize Him? After Jesus speaks here in the passage that we read, it tells us that the crowds they were amazed. They were totally captivated by Him and that they recognized His authority. Can the same be said for you and me? In our lives, are we people who are captivated and in total awe of Jesus? Or is the truth that we've just relegated Him to being a character on a page? To us, is He just one of many wise teachers who lived throughout history? Is He merely a figure that we glance at every once in a while? Or if truth be told, would it be that He's become someone that in our lives we actually just ignore completely? The wise person is the person who sees clearly. It's someone who recognizes that when it comes to Jesus, there is someone totally and utterly unique right before our eyes. And so when it comes to considering this teaching, and when it comes to thinking about what does it mean to be a follower or a disciple of Jesus, a key component in all of this is not just to see Him as one of many, it's to recognize Him as the one. And so to acknowledge Jesus' teaching and to live as the disciple, it means recognizing Him, but it also means responding to Him. Because the wise person, the person who truly recognizes Jesus for who He is, will always respond to what He says. But how do you do that? John is someone who has for months been complaining, or has had his family who just complaining about his hearing. They keep telling him, John, you have a serious problem here. You can't hear anything that's being said. But John's convinced that there's absolutely nothing wrong. And eventually, just to prove them wrong, he agrees to go and see a hearing specialist. And at the appointment, he's quick to tell the doctor, look, Doc, I'm only here because my family insists that I have to be here, but really, there's absolutely nothing wrong. And the doctor replies, John, that's all well and good, but just before we start the hearing test, could you list some of the symptoms for me? John replies, of course I can. There's Homer Simpson, Bart Simpson, Later Simpson. I've heard it said before that the biggest issue when it comes to the Sermon on the Mount is this. We've heard it all before. We actually studied this, as Stephen said last week, 4 or 5 years ago. And for most or many of us, this sermon that Jesus gives here it's a well-trodden path. And so our response to this might be to say, sure, I know it. I've heard it all before. And rather than being open to the potential of what God might be saying, we could be filled with an apathy and maybe moved to think, not again. We might find ourselves being people who are willing to hear, but we're not prepared to listen. And there really is a big difference with that. Over the years, Steph has asked me countless times, Rob, did you hear what I just said? And every time I'll reply, my darling dearest, of course I have. Only for her to say, yes, you may have heard me, but were you listening? You see, hearing is passive. To hear, you don't really have to engage. You don't have to concentrate. You don't have to be overly interested or concerned. You don't even have to care. But to listen, that is different. To listen, you have to focus. You have to care about what's being said and who it is that's saying it. Hearing is passive, but listening is active. And a way to know if we really are listening is that our listening will always lead to activity. In the movie The Matrix, the central character is a guy called Neo. And the people of the world in the movie are trapped. They're in trouble. There's nothing they can do about this. There's no way out. And early on in the film, we find out that Neo is the chosen one. He's the one who's been prophesied to come and rescue humanity. He's the one who's going to come and free them for their bondage and to do for them what they could never do for themselves. Does that sound like a familiar story? And when Neo is told this, when he's told that this is the path that's set out before him, he's not sure about it, and he really doesn't believe it. And there's a powerful moment in the film when another character says to him, Neo, you'll soon realize that there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And in this parable that Jesus tells, a marker of listening is to be someone who puts his words into practice and to live that out. It's not just to admire the teaching. It's not to memorize it. It's not to be intrigued or inspired by this teaching. Really, what Jesus is giving here is a call to obedience. It's an obedience to his teaching. And that means to find ways to live this out, to be open to what it is that he's saying, to be ready to consider how might this affect my life? How might this challenge me? And how might it connect with all the different areas of my life? What we have here right before us is one of the most famous and inspiring set of teaching of all time. Teaching that's recognized by those of faith and those with none to be some of the greatest and most influential words ever spoken in history. And so to breeze through that, to just treat it with apathy, to skim over the top and to fail to appreciate what it is that we have before us, to refuse the opportunity to listen to these words and then to put them into practice, that would be foolish. But to be wise, well, that's to listen to these words and then to put them into practice. But how? Here's a very quick suggestion. Every week over the past couple of years, I've been producing a little guide that goes out during the week, and the idea behind that is it helps people just to consider the upcoming passage for that Sunday. And this is what the new guide for this series will look like. And the aim of this one in particular is not so much about helping you to study the passage, which the old one would have been. The aim of this one is more about helping you to read the passage slowly. The Sermon on the Mount would actually only take 10, 15, 20 minutes to read. But really it's something that deserves to be savored. It's something that deserves to be just read slowly and expectantly with an openness to hearing what God might be saying to you through it. And my encouragement to you would be to try and get a hold of this guide each week. It's on our website every week. It goes out through Facebook, Instagram, young people. There you are. You have it, access to it, no excuse. It goes out in WhatsApp groups. It's something that's put out there everywhere. If you're someone and you're sitting here thinking now, but I don't know how to get onto any of that, come and speak to me and I'll print you off a copy each week. My encouragement would be to get a hold of this and to take 15 minutes, maybe multiple times during the week, to read slowly through the verses. Like this morning, it might only be 4 or 5 verses. It might be a few more, it might be less. But it's about being attentive to what's said, not skimming across it, not just getting it done and moving on to the next thing. Being open to what's being said here and then thinking about, how is it that I can put this into practice in my life? How might this be challenging me? Jesus is clear. The wise person is the person who listens to his teaching and puts it into practice. And so when we think about what does it mean to acknowledge Jesus' teaching and to live as a disciple, well, it's to recognize, it's to respond, and then finally, it's to rest. This is the Transcona grain elevator. It was built in 1913, and the purpose of this building was to store huge quantities of grain that was being transported from one side of Canada to the next. And when it came to the storage, the transportation, and the future of the grain industry in Canada, this elevator, this building was crucially important. And I'm sure when people looked at that, its sheer size and its presence, everything that you could see on the outside of this building, it would have just blown you away. However, when they began to fill the huge storage bins with grain, after about an hour, things started to go horribly wrong. The bins were torn away from the building, and everything began to sink. And this structure that looked the part, that no doubt took people's breaths away whenever they saw it, this structure that had purpose and that was full of great potential failed because the foundation it was resting on wasn't good enough. And a question that Jesus extends to us here, to those who are listening to him at this time, and us as we read it now, I think, is what is the foundation in your life? And a danger that existed for them and a danger that exists for us is that we're resting upon ourselves. I wonder, with the grain elevator, in the process of building this, did they just get caught up in the exterior, the size of the building, the capacity of the bins, the location, the design, its purpose? Did focusing on all of these external elements cause them to overlook the foundation? And you know, an easy trap to fall into when it comes to the Sermon on the Mount is to believe that it's all about the external. That what Jesus is teaching here centers solely on what it is that we are to do. That it's about being good people. It's good people and bad people. It's those who do and those who don't. But I think to think that is to miss the point. And it's actually something that Jesus challenges all throughout the Sermon on the Mount. Only a few verses before the passage we read this morning, you can read of people coming to Jesus and saying, Jesus, didn't we do great things for you? We drove out demons, we prophesied in your name, we performed many miracles. It's people saying to Jesus, look at the external, look at all I have done for you, look at all the ways I've obeyed, look at how good I've been for you. And what's Jesus' reply to these people? Away from me, I never knew you. It's as if Jesus is saying, that's all well and good, but in your life and all that you've done, not one bit of it was anything to do with me. You've rested on yourself. You've become your own foundation, and this is a foundation that cannot bear the weight. Tim Keller once noted that religion says, I obey, and therefore I'm accepted by God. And it can be so easy to believe that if I can do enough and work enough, if I can be someone who achieves, earns, and obeys, if I can be the person who lives the way of the Sermon on the Mount, then I'll do great things, I'll impact my community, and I'll be accepted by God. It can be so easy to get caught up solely on the external. And so then it's so important to know that what we do does not make us acceptable to God. There is nothing that we can do, nothing ever. We all find ourselves at our core being people who are disobedient to God and disconnected from God. And what this means for our lives and for our relationship with God, that is the great storm that we all face. We all find ourselves in the wrong when it comes to God, and there's nothing we can do about that to put it right. And if we think we can, then we're resting on the foundation of ourselves, and sadly, everything's going to come crashing down around us. Thankfully, that quote by Tim Keller continues. Religion says, I obey, therefore I'm accepted by God. But Christianity says, I'm accepted by God, and therefore I obey. Jesus' point when it comes to the end of this sermon is not to say, now you've heard all I've had to say, now take it, go off and do it, and find that by doing this, you're going to build for yourself a great foundation in life. He's saying, I am the foundation, and you're to rest your life upon me. And when it comes to the great storm that we all deserve to face, we know that Jesus has faced this for us. He's felt it and gone through it so we don't have to. And because he has, because of all that he has done, we can be accepted by God. And so we stand in him. This is where we rest. He is our foundation. We are accepted by God through all that Jesus has done. And this is where we stand. And because of that, then we cannot help but want to be people who will obey. Here, as Jesus wraps up all that he's said on the Sermon on the Mount, the question that he's asking is not, did you like my teaching? It's not, has this inspired you to go out and to do? He's asking, will you rest on me as the foundation of your life? What about you and I this morning? When you think of your own life, when you think of all that you are and all of it is what it is that you do, can you honestly say that you're resting on him? Where are you resting? This morning we're beginning at the end, and as Jesus wraps up here all that he has to say in the Sermon on the Mount, his call, his challenge to the people here listening to him is not just to admire him, it's not to respect him or to like him, it's to follow him. It's to become his disciple. And I think these last few verses of the Sermon on the Mount give us an indication of what this means, of what this would have looked like for them there and then listening to him, but also of what it would look like for us here and now. It gives us a blueprint of what it means to be his disciple, of how it is that we might engage with his teaching over the next few months. And that's to be people who recognize him for who he is. He's not just a good teacher. He's not just an interesting character or an inspirational figure. He is Lord, and he deserves to be recognized for that. It's to be people who respond to him, acknowledging the importance of who he is and the gravity of what it is that he's saying by listening to this and then putting it into practice. And then finally, it's to be people who rest, not on ourselves, not on anyone else, but only on him. Let's pray.